The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz along with Dan Rylance here, and we're continuing our shows this evening with interviewing candidates in the upcoming spring election. This evening we start with our school board candidates, and we're very pleased to welcome this evening an incumbent. He is currently in his 4th term. He's seeking a 5th term. Dennis Kavanaugh is here, and a challenger, Matt Wiedenhoeft. Did I get that right?
That is correct.
All right, excellent. An A for me. Make sure they do that for me, Dennis, right? An A. All right, and this is your first stab at the school board.
That is correct.
Have you ever run for office of any kind before?
No, nothing worth mentioning, I guess.
Okay.
I was president of a neighborhood association.
Okay.
But,
well, that's something. You know. I mean, that is. As someone who's done that, it's politics, you know, so. And hard work. So anyway, well, great. Thank you to both of you for being here, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come and answer what may be some pretty tough questions. So anyway, Dennis, why don't you tell us why you're seeking another term on the board, and then I'll ask Matt why he's seeking his 1st term.
My reason for running probably hasn't changed from the first time. I deeply believe that the community's strength is the educational system it offers. Without educational system, you don't attract businesses. I don't care how pretty the streets are or how pretty the sewage system is. You need a base of talented people. The school district provides that. And the Oshkosh School District is pretty good. It can get better, and it needs to get better, otherwise today's kindergartner will struggle. And I think I'm committed to that. I believe in earlier interventions. As you know, I work in prison. I see a lot of system failures, I guess. And I'm committed to interventions, and I think the Oshkosh is a good fit right now.
Okay.
We're moving along with some agendas that are difficult, but I think difficult is only if you don't look at them. And I think you need to look at some issues that are difficult right now.
Okay. Matt, why are you doing this crazy thing?
I actually couldn't really add too much to that in terms of, I always, as I said, thought Benjamin Franklin got it right. We are strong as a nation because of our public education system, and our public education system needs to be diligently maintained if we are going to be a viable country in the 21st century.
Okay, all right.
Could we ask if he has children in the school system?
Sure, and I was also going to ask if you guys could both, you're both very soft-spoken.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've got air ducts in here, and air is running, and microphones don't always pick up everything, so just if you can just keep your voice up, just a smidge, that'd be good, because we want to hear you, and we want the folks at home to hear you. So, yes, tell us a little bit
I
about
have a
yourself.
daughter, Amber. Amber is in the 2nd grade at Oakwood Elementary.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Are you from here originally? Or?
No, actually, we moved here very recently. I'm very new to the community.
Okay.
We moved here in August of last year, and we moved here specifically for my wife's job. She took a position at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and as an architect, I was able to come along. In fact, my company offered to allow me to open a new office.
Excellent. All right. So, as someone who's a newcomer to town, what are you seeing within the school district that has really kind of tripped your trigger, if you will? That's because there's other offices you could have sought.
Certainly, certainly, and actually, the idea of seeking office really didn't come about until almost December. I saw several things along the way which probably brought me to this. When we were first moving here, for instance, we had an experience with several realtors when we were looking at homes, where we asked, where our daughter would. We toured every elementary school, with the exception of Reed and Lincoln, because we knew that with my wife Jane being at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, we probably would want some distance between her place of work and where we were living. But for the most part, the realtors would reply with a statement that they didn't know. They could tell us where we would send our child this year, but they didn't know where we would send our child next year because there was redistricting going on, and they weren't really sure when it was going to happen. There seemed to be a lot of question as to what was going to happen and where it was going to go. Okay. That didn't automatically make me want to run for office, but as we went along, there were certain other issues that piqued my interest. One was the new school, and I looked at the report that was on the website, the school district website, the 2006 report, and I came to more or less an opposite conclusion. So that was certainly another thing that brought me.
Okay. Well, let's just dive right into those heavy-duty, tough questions then, and that is the referendum. I mean, I guess the first thing that strikes me, Dennis, and I will address this to you because you are a sitting board member, is, we're taping this on the 19th of February. The election, when this referendum is going to the people, is on April 7th. That's roughly about 6 weeks. That is not much time to really get public buy-in. I mean, if you can get public buy-in. I mean, there's a lot of negativity out there. I don't know just how much negativity, because it's hard to tell when you read the blogs and so forth. But, just the other night we saw Appleton's referendum questions fall to defeat. And I don't know, I guess that doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me that things here are going to pass, but there's such a short window of time. Do you really think that 6 weeks is enough time here?
I think, yes, I do. Right now, I think there's a concerted effort to get out a formal process and a singular message coming out of Oakwood. There's a number of specific forums going on at Oak Lawn that'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. But
just to interject, and we have those dates and the locations and the times on our website, which is ionoshkosh.com. So go ahead.
And I think we were concerned about having the message out too early, and we're trying to time the message. I think the 10-year plan, which led up to this, has certainly been well publicized, and I think so there's been a lot. It's not a secret coming out here right now, and I think that makes it a little bit easier. And I think that what we're trying to do, when you compare Appleton and ours, I think ours is a very specific referendum, and each question will have specific items identified. I think the Appleton one was much broader. We're talking about curriculum, and they were talking about some much broader concepts. We recognize in Oshkosh, you need to tell them specifically what we want to do and where we're going to do it, and roughly how much that item is going to cost there. So I mean, we've been trying to get that part done real specifically, so that people have an understanding of, if I vote yes for this, it'll show up here.
Okay. Well, let's dive into the questions. The very first question is going to be asking the voters for approval of $15 million based on prices from a year ago for a new North Side replacement school, and that school, of course, the proposed location is out on Riff Road. So I guess I'd like to ask each of you, I mean, obviously we know how you feel about this, but maybe articulate it for us. And Matt, if you could tell us how you feel. And I know that by the time, if you're elected, you take office, this issue is going to be decided.
Correct.
However, I think that it helps, to give us insight into your thought process. And also, if these do fail, then you will be on a board that has to come up with some alternatives, some kind of a backup. And, some of these may come around again. So it's good to hear what you have to say about it. So Dennis, you're the incumbent. Why don't you go ahead and articulate for us why this is a good thing and why that location in particular is a good thing.
Well, I think there's what we're trying to do here is to re-site Sunset School and to replace Oak Lawn. Now, anyone who has any issues that thinks that Oak Lawn site is a fine school, it's an embarrassment to the community, it's an embarrassment to the district. When you drive past that place, it looks like a third-rate school. Now, what's going on inside that building is far from it. I want to clarify that right away. What's going on inside that schooling is as good as anybody's in town. I think sometimes the teachers work a little harder there, but so I mean, you look at that. We've looked at alternative sites. The Riff Road site seems to be frustrating to some people, but we looked at 5 sites and we looked at a current site around there. The current site around there, to upgrade that site, if it was for sale, above the purchase price of the land, would be roughly $1 million, $1.2 million to clean up the site. To go down 8 feet, to put tile down, and then you're still putting a new school next to a mall. We looked at some sites out by the jail. You're putting a site between a county park and a jail. There's still no walking path. Once Oak Lawn is gone, the next site you're going to have, all kids will bust. The Riff Road site, in a reasonable, within a period of time, will have more walking kids to Riff Road than Oak Lawn has, just by how the area is growing. And I think the other thing we're looking at is the Sunset. By moving Sunset students out of Reed, you then open up space for the Lincoln kids to fit in. I mean, it's a 10-year plan, and that's the neat part about it. This is not a random act. It's part of a plan, and the plan is laid out. Now, how you get there, we took a first section at a time. We recognize that we have a lot of elementary schools, and at some point, if we want to keep our dollar in the classroom, we need to come up with more ways to be building efficient.
Okay.
And so that we can move the Lincoln kids to Reed, the Sunset kids to go back to their area. And at the end of the day in SF, there's one more bus running than there is now. Because right now there's 80 kids that are walked to Oak Lawn. The rest of the students in that school are bused.
Okay. Matt, what are your thoughts? I mean, give a response or a critique, if you will, whatever you want to call it. And guys, feel free to interact with each other. You don't have to, this isn't just a question and answer thing. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves too. Just include us. So go ahead.
Well, I will start out by saying, yes, you're right. Obviously, these 3 issues will be decided before I would ever take office, and therefore they aren't really direct issues of my campaign. But they're certainly issues that piqued my interest and created my involvement in the first place. And I will say that as I get involved, it becomes more and more difficult to hold my position without coming up with a viable alternative. And with that in mind, and I would like to state basically how I came here, how I came to this decision in the first place, but I'm giving myself basically 2 weeks, the next 2 weeks. By March 7th, if I can't come up with a better plan, I will probably be voting yes for the referendum rather than no. But my current problems with the site, which is also in the newspaper that came out earlier this week, Riff Road is basically at the very western edge of the district, just as Oak Lawn is at the very sort of southeast of its area. And certainly finding a location that is more centrally located would have been nice. I understand the idea that they did look, and I understand that they don't want to place it in the middle of an industrial area. That certainly seems logical. I also was troubled by the idea that they would move it from a location which has a denser population. Even if new homes, which certainly if you build a new school, it's pretty likely that you would end up with new homes around it, just like you did at Carl Traeger. But the density of those homes would never match the density of the homes around the existing site. With that in mind, my next question to myself was, can you rebuild at the existing site? Obviously, it's certainly been talked about enough. If you could increase the size of the property, and if you could rebuild on that existing site, what would you have? Well, unfortunately, I'm coming to the conclusion that what you would have would be a school that would still be placed more or less at the edge of its student area, of its pardon?
Good point.
Of its population that it's serving. And unfortunately, I think that's probably part of the problem with the 16 elementary schools that they have, or that we have, I should say, is that if you, as a planner, I think you will find a pretty common ground in a 1 mile walking distance. Most planners think of that as pretty standard, pretty common. New communities, new urbanism usually uses a 1 mile walking area as a standard. And if you draw a circle around the schools, I did this myself. I took a map and I drew circles around all the elementary schools with a 1 mile walking area, and unfortunately they all overlap tremendously in Oshkosh. So they're not really located, unfortunately, in a way that would allow you to best utilize them as walkable schools. I really prefer walkable schools. One of the things we really liked about moving here was the school district. I'll say that right from the beginning, that we moved here and we were very happy to see the work that was being done in the schools. When we went to Smith and they were talking about teaching Chinese to the children, I thought that was amazing. That was the sort of forward-thinking schools that I was looking for. But another point that I looked into so far, and which I still haven't come to terms with either, is the fact that it's going to be a population in that school of approximately 500. And when I looked into the articles and the studies that deal with small schools versus large schools, the definition of small and large school varies tremendously. But pretty much I found that it seems to stick to around 3 to 350 as a cutoff for a small school, and that typically they saw greater advantages in small schools. Obviously, the cost per student was often higher for those schools, but interestingly enough, one of the studies was talking about if you looked at the cost per graduate as opposed to the cost of student, the cost was actually the same or less in several of the studies.
Okay.
So,
and if I could
Absolutely.
add to that,
Absolutely.
when you mentioned the size of the school, one of the things that happens at Oakland right now, and it happens with our special population throughout the city, they're constantly being moved around. There's 90 special students I should say, there's students of that 90 that are out of the district right now, out of that area because of crowding, but also there's special ed population in this district never knows for sure where the site's going to be, and we're trying, the 10-year plan try to raise it, but we're trying to put students, special ed students, with their peer group in the school. And so that means yes, you get a little bit bigger school. But at the same time, I think that population is often ignored or easy to put aside, but I think it's a very valuable population. And I think the students benefit from having the special ed student in that area. And we're trying to do more things in the classroom. So I mean, it's a combination of things that go on. And again, sometimes the neighborhood is, some of us live in big neighborhoods and some of us live in small neighborhoods, but it's still the neighborhood, and it's what happens in the neighborhood that makes the neighborhood.
Okay.
Do you want to keep going with the other two measures, or?
Sure, and then I guess
I have some other things, but
yeah. Well, the referendum is such a big issue, and then we'll
let's
have
keep
to
going
get
with
into
it.
some other things. Let's cover the other two questions, and then I want to find out what the alternative is if one or all of these falls to defeat. So the second question then is. Voters will be asked to allow the district to exceed revenue caps by $1.3 million a year, basically for 4 years, which comes out to $6.5 million. Not precisely, but I'm sure they're rounding it up. For a total of 5 years to address deferred maintenance across the district. So, what kind of deferred maintenance are we talking about here, and why is this necessary?
I guess I'm going first.
Sure, you're the incumbent, Dennis.
I think what we're looking at, since the time I've been on the board, we've gone from a $400,000 maintenance budget to a $600,000 to an $800,000 base, and then you always add on to it, but you start off with the $800,000 base, and you can't keep up that many schools with that money. So a couple years ago, we took some money out of the fund balance to do the roofs. The population needs to understand that this district has over 44 acres of roofs. Roofs leak, and if we were doing somebody handed me some information that if you were going to do an acre of roof a year, you'd be allocating almost $1 million a year for roofs. I mean, roofs are one project. When we did the surveys, the other thing we were looking at, we can be more efficient in our schools. We can get steam traps. Or there's economies of scale out there that we are not able to take advantage of in our current packages. We have, we're two of our schools, the boilers are close. They're certainly not efficient, but at least they're functioning. I mean, and there's in need of replacement. And people need to understand when you build a school, it's for 50 or 75 years. And Oshkosh certainly has pulled the life and stretched the max to these schools, and I think we've been good stewards that way. But it comes to a point of stuff where you need to go back in some infrastructure things again. In boilers, HVACs, those are major components that the public hardly ever sees. But you can certainly tell when they don't work. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it. Some maintenance on the outside of the building. We often got accused for the tuck point at South Park. But little things, if you let them go, they'll always come back. Anyone who owns a home knows that if you let things slide, it'll come back to you. And I think we're trying to measure how far we can push some limits before, and this is what we're asking for. It is to bring because we're trying to say, again in the 10-year plan, that we're going to treat all buildings fairly, so that all students get an equal opportunity inside the building. So we're working on that.
One of the arguments that I think we've all heard, and I'm sure that you have too, is that you defer maintenance, and yet you spend money on tennis courts or bleachers or what have you. And I'm sure that there's some justification, or you guys wouldn't have done it. But I guess, can you articulate what the justification is?
Let's take the tennis courts. Tennis courts are a maintenance item. If we're going to have tennis courts, you need to maintain them. The opportunity that came up, the money the district put into those tennis courts are roughly, maybe $15,000 over that, but roughly the cost of what we would have put in just to resurface them. That the North Tennis Athletic Club and some key sponsors were able to obtain funding, matching fundings from a number of different sources that our actual costs were roughly what we would have paid to have the tennis course resurfaced. The stuff around it and a better course than digging them up was all part of of their contribution to it. So actually the district costs are about the same if we had gone in and blacked out the courts or resurfaced the courts. I guess that would be the term.
Okay, all right. Matt, question number 2.
Actually, I would certainly vote in favor of referendum item number 2. As an architect, the building edifice is key if you're going to keep the building. And in fact, I would go even farther to say that if you have 40 acres of roof, and if you're putting on the types of roofs, for instance, that were put on in the last few years, you have a 20-year life cycle, and so you need to probably do 2 acres of roofs a year instead of 1. So you probably have an even higher cost than Dennis had stated. And I would actually be in favor of not only this referendum, but having seen the backlog of maintenance items that they're talking about, some of which certainly could be catastrophic if they come up immediately, such as if a boiler does go out permanently and you have to replace it. You're talking about a very large ticket item there. I would be in favor even of a second one, provided that somehow we get back to a budget that allows for the maintenance to be done in a timely manner as it goes, as opposed to building up and then needing a referendum. But in order to get back to a situation where you could do that, I think we definitely need this referendum pass, and we probably need yet another one.
Okay, and so that's on question number 2, just so
Correct.
people don't get mistaken and thinking that Matt's in favor of the whole thing.
Oh,
He's
I'm sorry.
Hey, he's undecided
Number
yet
two.
on question number 1.
Can I follow up a question
go
on
ahead.
that?
Certainly.
The strongest argument I hear from people is the same argument I hear on the city on not doing their streets. That Oshkosh just keeps, and as a new person, you know, I'm new, but I'm here longer than you have been, that there's sort of a theme in Oshkosh that it's a very frugal community, it's a conservative community, and you just push these things back and don't do anything. And the biggest argument I hear against number 2 is people saying, you know, this is a board that has postponed maintenance for so many years. I'm not going to vote yes for this.
And I would come back to that one, that's we've been spending money, we're spending roughly $1.3 to $1.5 million a year on flat-out maintenance.
Okay.
And I think that I will argue that it's not enough, but it's making a significant effort to trying to maintain that. I mean, and again, I'll temper mine a little bit with that. If I'm given a choice, I'll make my maintenance to the edge, but I'll put my money in the classroom. I think that there's a balance. There's always going to be that tug of war between the reality is there's some certain amount of money, of resources available, and it's how you're going to use those resources. I mean, I suppose you could tax people and build up the fund balance to $10 million. What, you got a $10 million, you got a big savings account, and if you're not going to spend it on anything, and you're just going to have it for savings, I think that's cheating on the public too. But I think it's a matter of identifying what you're going to do with it. I think that's, but we have been doing it. We're given a good chunk of buildings. They're older buildings, and older buildings cost more to maintain.
Sure. Do you have any response to that? Or?
Just that I agree that certainly the overall thing that you're trying to do is to educate children. I can't argue that in the least. But as an architect, I certainly I like to see the edifice itself maintained. Roofs to me are paramount. The skin of the building itself is paramount. You know, tuck pointing, that sort of thing. Certainly, you know, if you want to maintain the building so that you can teach students for a prolonged period of time, and so that you can avoid the possible necessity of building new schools, you've got to keep that. And actually, back to your point about the public being frugal and not wanting to pursue these items, I think it would be in much better interest to actually pursue them as we go, rather than to have a frugal public put it off. So.
One architectural question. If you were designing a school, would you have a flat roof?
You know, I actually, well, flat is a misnomer.
Okay.
It's low slope versus
Okay.
a pitched roof.
Okay.
Pitched roof is
Dennis
generally
is
312 and higher, and
Yeah.
a low slope is generally
Okay.
312 and lower. And so almost every roof that you have is actually pitched in some manner.
Okay.
What most people call a flat roof actually is a very economical way to go, and I actually don't have an opposition to that.
Okay.
You can do a 2-ply built-up modified bit, and it'll last you for years. And
Dennis wants to come in on that.
And that question, I've asked that question since Fred Boss was on the floor.
Okay.
Give me a pitch, and they come back, and
Yeah.
they keep telling me is, if you have a good subsurface, a good structure that holds the roof, then the roof on top and that stuff, it actually, you have a lot of variables with that.
Well,
if you have a good substructure.
On the roof that they're proposing for the new school,
Right.
for instance, over the K, the preschool and K wing, they're talking about the idea of a possibility that you could put another floor on that. So that actually, I assume, would be a flat roof
okay.
with a tapered insulation on top to get you your pitch. And there'd be thus a very good reason why you wouldn't want to pitch that roof. because
Obviously.
it would cost you more later to
Sure.
rip it off and
Yeah.
put on something else.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
One of the things that
Pitched roofs also, by the way, can bring in other items such as, then there are other things that you have to do if you have a pitched roof and you have that attic space, which can drive up the cost of the building. So.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
Got your
No, yeah,
architecture
yeah,
lesson
it's
for
just-
the day, right?
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that you know, we've probably all heard in the community too is You know, well, if that teachers union would just let go of their death grip on their wages and benefits, and you know, maybe forego a 3.8% wage and benefit increase. You know, let their wages and benefits freeze for a time, or maybe forever. Who knows what some of these folks want? But
Well,
you know,
even eliminate some teachers. Let's go even further.
yeah.
Right?
You know, then you'd have money to do some of these other things, and we haven't even gotten to the third referendum question yet. But that's really, I think, comparing apples with oranges, because A, they don't have to forego anything. And if you try and force them, you're going to end up in arbitration. And so if you try and, if you vote no, and just to stick it to the teachers union and in the teachers, then you're going to end up with buildings that just continue to decay and fall into disrepair. And
You're saying if you vote no on number 2?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, you'll just have buildings falling apart. You won't ever get them repaired.
And I think when you bring up the teachers, I mean, it's there's something that I'm fully aware of. Students will always remember a teacher. They won't remember the principal, and they won't remember the school board.
I remember my principal. My
You're
first
probably
principal.
in the office.
So
a
you
lot.
were visiting there a
No,
lot.
I wasn't actually.
But there's some information out that, you know, so with that in mind, the investment in that classroom teacher, an investment in training that teacher, and an investment of having a classroom for that teacher is what carries the day, because they will be remembered. And although we think we're really important, and we do have an influential job, but at the end of the day and that stuff is what happens in the classroom is important. And I think it's easy to hammer the teachers because of that. You know, if you talk to teachers, they would love to see QEO go away, and they'd love to see some other things go away. In some ways, it's a poison pill. I mean, we wouldn't be having the discussion on the referendum without that package out there too. So I mean, it's a pro and con discussion, and I mean, it's a 3-leg stool, and I think if you start chipping away at legs, you better take them all out with the arbitration, and you have to have the whole package fixed, because it's a little tenuous right now with some areas, and like you said, if we do nothing, it's 3.8. And I think last year we'd end up at 3.8, and we had some significant language changes. I think that was a good bargain.
Well, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, should the teachers maybe be paying a little bit more of their insurance? Well, maybe so. I mean, that's the reality of the way our economy is and our world is going. And yet, until some laws get changed, that's not going to happen probably.
And I think what the teachers have done, rather than pay more of their premiums, they've changed their plans, and there's more co-pays in their plans right now. So they're paying more out-of-pocket cost, but it's not coming out of the premium part. But so the premiums have relatively stayed the same because they've opted for a lower cost plan that has more co-pays, more deductions. The med card drug card, excuse me, has changed. So I mean, there's other ways of getting at their contribution to their benefits.
And I happen to be one of these people who thinks that by and large a lot of teachers are underpaid for everything that they have to do. I really do think that the better majority of them are not paid what they probably should be for what they're doing, but that's another whole discussion. Anyway, on to question number 3. That will ask voters to allow the district to exceed revenue caps by $500,000 a year for 5 years, so we're talking $2.5 million here, for the purpose of small additions and renovations. Again, you're the incumbent, and you've been dealing with this for a lot longer than Matt has here. So I'll come to you, Dennis. What kind of additions and renovations are we talking about here?
Well, I'll go back to our 10-year plan again. In that 10-year planning process, public management partners, PMP.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
When they did a survey, it came up with the public wanted safety. Safety was a big concern in the school. So that much of this money is being allocated to modifying entrances, either through brick and mortar or through surveillance things, that once you send your child to school, you could be relatively sure that the child is in school and it's a secure, a more secure environment. we're not going to build prisons here. We're going to make them more secure. But I think that's the hierarchy of things we're doing is for that part. Now some board members are unhappy that why aren't we putting more science labs into West with that. I think the hierarchy that was established through that survey was safety first. In other phases, I think West clearly needs some classroom renovation. That'll come. But I think we have to Maslow's hierarchy. There's something's got to come first, and the community said safety was what their concern was.
Could I just interject that there are many schools where you can get into the school pretty easily without being detected, and there are some schools where the office is far away from the main door, so that they cannot control the traffic that's in. So when we're talking about, I think we're talking about things like this, aren't we?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, in some schools, to find the office.
Right. It's a difficult thing. You could walk around the school inside for 3 times and you wouldn't find the office.
But I mean, so that's what it's trying to address. I mean,
yeah, I understand.
It's a serious matter, but we're trying to be, it's a, making that identified better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I do wonder if the PMP report, if the public actually might have been getting over a sort of a knee-jerk reaction from other pretty drastic events that had happened around the country. And if perhaps that was more on the forefront of their mind then than it is now. I actually am in support of this, provided that everybody understands what they're actually getting. And I think you're right as far as, you know, should we be building science classrooms instead? Boy, yeah, I'd love to put this money towards that instead. But I think it's a reasonable precaution that the administration knows who's in the building.
Absolutely.
This is not going to protect you against an armed intruder. And I think that ought to be very clear to everybody. This is not going to protect you against that. Someone who wants to get into this building in that manner could. And at one of the meetings, I believe at Oak Lawn, it was mentioned that West has something like 244 doors or something like that, which I assume is, you know, obviously you have doors in a row. So. But it's important to remember that doors help you not only get in, but they help you get out. And if there would be a situation like that, where you had some sort of armed intruder, those doors are going to be the lifelink to get everybody out fast and prevent such a tragedy. So you don't really want to somehow turn it into a prison. You want to make sure that it's open. But I would be for it because I believe that allowing the administration to know who's in the building is a very reasonable precaution.
Okay, good.
Can we get away from this now, or do you want to keep going on
Well,
this?
we haven't come up with a plan B yet, and then we can move on.
Okay.
If this stuff fails, Dennis, where does this board then go? And if Matt is on the board, you know, where do you guys go?
I think it doesn't, situation remains the same. I think we have a limited maintenance budget. I think we can do some things out of fund balance, but I think you run the risk of you taking too much out of fund balance that then when you need to borrow money for your cash flow purposes and that stuff, you are getting hammered with a much higher rate than you should have to be paying. But so I mean, there's some of those things. I think you have to go back and reprioritize. I think the safety around this, you need to come up with different ways of maybe need volunteers in the school to man the doors and with radios to communicate who's coming in. Much less efficiently of doing things. I think that at some point, I mean, the Oak Lawn building the building itself will dictate a drastic action at some point. And what concerns me is and then the board will be hammered for, like Sunset, you let the mold grow. Well, we didn't let mold grow, we didn't know about it. It was an old building that was water going through it, much like the water was going through Oak Lawn. And it's always a concern back then because you're putting young kids in there. And that's a concern, that we have to do something to, again, regrade the area again, re-slope it or something, but to make those kind of things. But it's a tough situation. I'm not willing to raise the classroom sizes for maintenance. I think I'm concerned about that. I think there's some things you have to do. If the boiler goes out, well, we'll fix it. But it's going to be a big chunk of the fund balance.
Okay.
I'm certainly concerned that if number 2 does not pass, something else is going to have to be done that's pretty drastic. These issues have got to be solved, absolutely. As far as number 1 is concerned, obviously if it passes, I'm going to be doing my best to ensure that if elected that I make sure it's the best school it possibly can be. If it doesn't pass, so far what I've concluded is that I would probably be in favor of the K3, 4, 8 redistricting plan that was approved, I believe, by the board at one point, and that would at least go a long way to solving the problem of where kids are going to go to school, in terms of what to do with Oaklawn, because that still doesn't really solve the Oaklawn problem. I would probably be, if not championing, certainly in favor of yet another referendum to do something there. Unfortunately, as I say, this comes back to why I'm giving myself 2 weeks to come up with a better answer. I'm not sure that building a new school at that site is in the best interest of the community. I'm becoming increasingly aware that because of the, as I say, the walking distances that are around them, the fact that most of the kids who are going to be walking, certainly to the east, they're going to be walking to Emmeline Cook, and to the south, they'll be walking to Merrill. And so you don't really have, even if you rebuild on that site, most of the children who are going to be going to that school aren't going to be walking anyway, because they're going to be coming from areas farther to the north and to the west. With that in mind, if this does not pass, as I say, I think another look should be taken at the K3 and 4-8 plan, but it doesn't really help out Oaklawn to solve the problems of the fact that their art room is also the gymnasium, that the computer room is a cart in the hallway, and things of that nature. So there certainly would certainly still be issues that would need to be solved, and some of them are to a degree that you probably couldn't solve them without another referendum, because I certainly wouldn't want, if number 2 and number 1 didn't pass, I certainly wouldn't want to be taking money away from the existing maintenance fund in order to produce a capital improvement at Oaklawn.
Okay. You know, I think one of the frustrations that I've personally felt, Dennis, over the course of the last year and a half or so is, you know, you guys came up with one plan to close, you know, some schools and do this redistricting. And then you heard from a contingent of neighbors there, and, you know, not with my kids' school. And then you pitched another plan, and then those families came forward. And it just seems like the board, while I appreciate they're trying to listen to the citizenry, it just seemed like the board didn't have much of a backbone when it came to this issue. It just seems like you guys should have, I mean, I think it makes sense to say, okay, we're going to pitch our best idea first. And I'm assuming that that's what you guys did. You don't pitch your second or third best first, you know, with something better floating out there. So I'm assuming that you pitched your best idea first. And then you just kept kind of going down the scale. And consequently, nothing really got done. You know, and it just seemed like the board sort of acquiesced to each group of parents that came forward and said, not with my kids' school, and nothing got done.
Actually, if I can jump in front of you for just a second, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Absolutely. Dennis probably glad on this one anyway.
I should probably have finished my last point by saying that the K3 and 4-8 plan would close schools. And as I stated in the newspaper, I would be in favor of closing the Green Meadow School, mostly because those children are being bused already, and therefore to bus them to a different location seems more logical to me than to close more of our schools at the inner city where the kids actually do walk. Certainly, Lincoln and Reed are very close together, and as I recall, the redistricting in the K3 and 4-8 plan could close Green Meadow, Lincoln, and I believe one other, although I can't remember what it was anymore. Was it Smith? Okay, so
Yeah.
by presenting that as the alternative that I would like to revisit, I am in fact then stating that those are schools that I would be in favor of closing.
Sure.
Before Dennis answers that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment.
I do too. And you know, it's interesting as a newer person, I don't mean that negatively, he's hitting on boundary changes. Remember his circle study that and he's talking about class reconfiguration. And that kind of was what you started with Dennis, is that he's noticing that those two issues haven't been solved, and he brings them up as I think astute observations of the situation.
Well, I guess I would want people to know where I stand.
Yeah, no, I think that,
if they're going to elect me,
but
this would be what I would be proposing.
But those are uncharted. You know, decisions have not been made on the very things that you brought up, and and they have been discussed for a long time.
Yeah.
But as you said, with no real decision.
Well, and also with respect to this, going to a different school is going to somehow throw my child into an emotional tailspin. I started going to Roosevelt as a child, and now my memory is pretty good, but I don't remember why this happened. But for a year, at least a year, it might have been 2, but I believe it was just for 1, I had to go to Franklin. And it didn't upset anything within me. It didn't upset anything with my friends. We made new friends, and we continued those friendships, even when those of us from Roosevelt went back to Roosevelt. And to your point, Matt, these schools are all in such close proximity, while they may not meet the true definition or someone's true definition of a neighborhood school. It was close enough that I could walk to either one.
Sure.
And again, it didn't upset anything within my emotional apple cart, So anyway, Dennis, I want to give you a chance to address this.
Yeah,
we're talking about no backbone here.
Yeah.
Actually,
and I think one thing, I was president during those times, and we were given a lot of advice that if you want to get a referendum out there, you need to have a 7-0 consensus on a plan. And I think a real effort was made, but to try to get that done, and I think it was a struggle, and we went back and forth, and I think and once we wavered on one, perception was altered that okay, we can hit on others, and it's not my neighborhood, but I believe that our heart was in a place of trying to get a consensus or unanimity, so that some board members who weren't in support of the original ones, we went back and reached again to see if we could find some commonality, because we recognized it was important to find a. Now, hindsight, now we could have had the 10-year plan done 8 months earlier and with the same vote and had a.
Do you remember the quote you said in the paper? It was one of your great one-liners. You remember it? I'm so frustrated I could spit. You remember that? I'll never forget that, because it was such a great one-liner.
I was frustrated.
You were frustrated. Did you spit?
I didn't.
He swore instead.
But it was. I mean.
Yeah,
but the point. But again, if I look at it in another way, and stuff, what we did and stuff, we certainly explored in a very upfront fashion, right out in public in front of God and everybody, that here are options we're looking at.
Yeah.
And again, what Matt said and what you said are absolutely correct. The students have no issue with what school they go to. They're going to relate to the kids sitting next to them and the teacher in front of them. It's the parents. The parents have perceptions of schools, and I think that's the part of what we were trying to get at. Every school in this district, if it's not providing the same quality of education, then it's an issue we need to be fixing. There's no question about that. But I don't believe that is going on. I think every school in this district gets the students the education that's needed. And that's a hard message to get out there. When you look at a kid at Oaklawn, or well, let's pick on Traeger, because Traeger's always, you look at Oaklawn, you look at Traeger, there's clearly different facilities. The kids come out looking pretty much the same after they go through the grades. It's a testament to the quality of the teacher we got. But is it frustrating? And we spent probably too much time in the 10-year plan trying to get a consensus.
Well, and I think parents too need to understand that, you know, their kids are going to go through changes all through life. You know, parents think nothing of moving to a different house, whether it's in the city or out of the city. You know, kids will go on to, you know, junior high or middle school, as you guys call it these days, to high school, then to college or a technical school of some kind. Maybe they won't go on at all. They'll change jobs multiple times in their lives. And, you know, it's change. These things happen. So, anyway, you wanted to move on.
Yeah, I have some general questions.
All right.
Education is a complex subject. What do either of you do to know more about education? What do you read or watch that makes you a more knowledgeable candidate for the school board?
Well, I mean, for my part, we get a lot of wonderful materials presented to us and board packets about this position, that position, or education this way. I mean, I listen. I'm a social worker by training. If nothing else I do well, I listen well.
Okay.
And I take advantage of the WASB presentations that are out there. I mean, I've gone out, I mean, all over and to the but I believe that if I'm going to be on the board, it's important to take advantage of these situations. Because I mean, I'm not an educator. I see the results of things that don't go wrong, that go wrong when education fails. And again, I take more things from the education stuff I've learned to my job site because it's free and I'm stealing it. I mean, I'm taking it back and applying it. I'm applying some different things in a different environment. I think it's healthy.
Okay.
But I mean, I try to do that. We get a lot of materials coming in from school board magazines. And again, when the packets that come out when you talk a new curriculum or a new classroom, take the time to read that. I mean, everyday math, for example. We had a lot of bruises that still exist from some of that, but when you look at our math scores now because of that, it was a good decision. But it was, I mean, you got to be invested into the research that goes on and take advantage of the materials presented to you.
How about you?
I'm certain that obviously in your line of work you run across more of it than I do. As an architect, I am required myself to have continuing education hours. But in terms of what they're actually teaching in the school, probably my biggest conduit there is my daughter, and you know what she brings home every night, and what she's currently doing, you know, in school. Other things that I guess I've been involved in the past have been I was involved with the East Allen Family Resource Center when I was in Fort Wayne as a board member there, and that was basically an agency that tried to provide not only after-school care but pre-K and things of that nature, as well as continuing education courses for adults that needed it.
I have a question on testing. Teachers, parents, and kids know that measuring student achievement is a necessary factor to determine what is and is not working, but a school is more than a testing laboratory. How will you encourage our schools to educate the whole child so that he and she are prepared to do more than just pass a test?
Wow, that's good.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, I think that first off, you're right. You're going to have to give some sort of standardized tests as you go along in order to try and judge where children are in relation to each other. Certainly with regards to some basic items. But one of the things that the PI Council is currently looking into is what can be done, and actually they've already begun to implement some of the things into the curriculum. I was amazed actually at how fast they had worked to implement some of these things, since Dr. Daggett had just spoken a year ago, or not even a year ago at this point.
He was at the chamber.
Yeah, he was at the chamber
speaker.
in April,
Yes.
and in doing so, he sort of served as a catalyst to get people thinking about the fact that when you're in an art class, you also may be taking advantage of reading, you may be taking advantage of opportunities to have mathematics in there, and that integrating these things are what is going to create a whole child in and above standardized tests.
Sure. Are we doing too much testing?
Of course, I believe we are. But I think that's the law, and we'll comply with it. But I think what I'm concerned with is to make the value judgments of the whole district or of a whole school on that day in October is flawed. But I'm pleased to see that what we're doing with our grades. If you'll see it in your elementary that the letter grades are slowly disappearing in the elementary, and you're getting proficient.
Yes.
I mean, and you're getting real measurements right now. We're going to a standard space that Johnny is being measured against Johnny. And now we have enough evidence that we should be able to measure Johnny in the 2nd grade to 4th grade and 6th grade on our own. I think we're seeing the high school change. Middle school is already changing to the grading concept to being able to identify. Parents are having a hard time with that because is it an A or B? What we're trying to get at is.
And there's a real. The key to that is because when I first ran into this with my own daughter, I looked at it and I actually thought it was really not that much different. You know, if it's an A, B, or C, or if it says good, proficient, or what have you, it's the same thing. But it's actually not, and I guess the key point there is what is making the parents aware of what is proficient. You know, what's the definition there, and that definition is going to provide you with the knowledge you need to make sure that your child is properly educated.
Sure. All right, we're just about out of time, and I want to give each of you a chance to. I know we had a lot more questions, and Dan was worried about maybe filling an hour here. We could fill 3 hours probably. I want to thank both of you for being here, and I want to just say, Matt, you are refreshing. I find you very refreshing.
Thank you.
You know, there's a lot of people out there who are just well, we've heard it from one candidate, vote yes for me so I can say no for you. And they thrive on just saying no, and you at least seem to have an open mind, and you're approaching things with, I think, a common sense approach, and that is refreshing. And very welcoming to people like us, so thank you very much. Why don't you each take about 30 seconds, just look into the camera there and tell folks why they should vote for you on April 7th. Go ahead, Dennis.
Well, I'm Dennis Kavanaugh. Again, I'm running for school board for my 5th term. I think I'm making a significant impact. I want to make an impact, and I'm not afraid to make a decision. I can say yes or I can say no, but it's going to be based upon the impact of that decision on the kids in the classroom. I think that's the big issue.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Matthew Wiedenhoeft. I am also running for school board, and I am hoping to leave the institution in better shape than when I found it.
All right, excellent. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks to both for being on the show.
And good luck. And that's going to do it for us.
That's it.
Wow. Go to the polls on Tuesday, April 7th. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.